Morning, everyone. So for the next 8 or so minutes, I just want to take you through some of the projects that IMR are working through, some of the concepts that we're discussing with our partner companies across two primary axes. One is about getting industry back to work from this crisis and to understand how we can get back and be productive while adhering to the social distancing constraints that are necessary in order to combat the virus. But the second part of this is, how do we build resilience for the future? So how do we build capacity to be able to cope with these types of shutdowns in the future? And how do we use the best of this technology to become more productive and competitive for the future? You've seen some of the macroeconomic trends globally that might necessitate more nearshoring and reshoring of some of our production capacity and some of our supply chains. And some of these technologies are going to change to permanent changes to the nature of work in manufacturing as well. And we look at some of those as well. So in terms of the project that we're working on, obviously we're seeing that the need to be hands-free and to be able to operate manufacturing remotely or with a lower density of staff on the shop floor is critically important. And there's a number of key technologies that are enabling this. Obviously, IoT and digitization are enabling us to take data real-time from some of our machines and enabling things like remote management, remote maintenance. And this is allowing us to keep the factory operations running whilst minimizing the number of staff on the shop floor. It's also enabling us to combat some of the challenges we've seen in terms of supply chain capacity and flexibility and resilience. And we start to see that we're working with companies across a range of these different vectors in terms of where IoT and digitization can have a very positive impact on manufacturing. Will allow us to get back to work, but also allow us to be much more competitive and flexible into the future. Automation is obviously getting a lot of attention in terms of the current crisis and its ability to, again, minimize human touch onto products and in the density of human operators on the factory floor. That's not to say that we're removing lots of people from the workforce, but we're now sort of seeing that there's a trend towards automation and people being able to operate and maintain these automated systems. But certainly there are options that we're working on with a number of our partner companies around the idea of telerobotics, mobile robotics, and collaborative robotics. And all of these technologies have a place in enforcing and maintaining some of these social distancing requirements now, but also into future. But they're also enabling increased productivity, lights out manufacturing, and these types of things are broadly applicable to maintaining the competitiveness of Irish manufacturing long into the future and even after the current crisis is gone. What we're looking at is being able to rapidly prototype some of these technologies, get them into the factory floor as fast as possible, and certainly the core of our research in the immediate term and the medium term is to work with partner companies to be able to rapidly deploy these technologies in, and in many cases being able to prototype them in our Mullingar facility very quickly first into a real live environment and then port those over into the factory environment. Another area of development that we're seeing very critical to the success of getting back into manufacturing and being able to sustain that manufacturing against similar crises or similar shutdowns in the future is the idea of virtualization. So we've looked at the idea of being able to virtualize the workforce through data sources and digitization enabled by IoT, but also the ability to interact with that data is very much supported by technologies like augmented and virtual reality and streaming video. And we're working with a number of companies now that are looking at applications like remote line validation, being able to work with their supply chain partners throughout the world and use these technologies instead of physical visits to be able to move the process along. So validate parts, validate lines, but also to look at things like remote assistance, which enables separation of the workforce from remote environments and physical environments. In the area of data analytics then, so once we have this data, we want to be able to adapt the factory to cope with some of these stresses that are coming in. This is becoming very dominant now in terms of many of the projects that we're working with, and we would certainly encourage our partner companies to speak to us if these technologies might offer solutions to some of their current challenges. So we're looking at best ways to optimize the workforce, optimize line design, factory design, to be able to cope with some of the emerging standards about how to work in these environments, and to be able to show compliance with the emerging standards for this new work paradigm. So some of the things we're looking at are dynamic workforce allocation models, how to put workers onto a fleet of machines, fleet of resources in the optimal way to increase productivity, increase throughput, while maintaining compliance with some of the necessary restrictions that are in place. And then the final broad theme of technologies we're obviously looking at is the whole area of rapid prototyping. So from new product design to supporting rapid production, you'll see some examples here that IMR have been working on in the area of PPE to support our frontline workers, and new product development in terms of supporting some of the critical medical equipment that's going to be required, both in the current crisis, but also as a prevention for future explosions of the virus and other things. But also looking at supporting companies in terms of how they develop responses to the crisis, how they bring back some of their critical supply chains to make them more resilient. And resilience is a key element for how manufacturing is going to sustain itself into the future, in conjunction with some of the financial and business measures that Mike previously discussed. So IMR is working with companies across a range of the technologies, from 3D printing, subtractive machining, and from electronics design and development and integration. So what's next? Well, obviously we're working with some companies, and you've seen examples of some of those projects, but we want to understand what our companies need from us. So we appreciate there's a range of technologies and projects that will be relevant for the near-term recovery. There's a range of technologies and projects that companies will need to work on for their long-term resilience, and we want to understand what those are. We want to be working on the most impactful things for Irish industry. So over the next week or so, we'll be reaching out to a lot of our client companies. We would ask you to please take the time to spend time with my colleague and myself as we run around to understand what your real needs are, to get you back to work and to sustain that environment. So we will be reaching out to you, but we'd also encourage you to reach out to us as well. So if any of these technologies or anything else that you've thought about in terms of how you can get back to work and sustain that is relevant to this conversation, please do get in touch with us, and we're very willing to support any conversation in that regard. I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time this morning, and please stay safe.